I use she, they pronouns, and I am the youth advisory specialist here at April. So I am just so thrilled that y'all are here. Um, I did just go ahead and spotlight the interpreters. We have two different folks interpreting today. But I am just so glad that y'all are here. Thank you for your really thoughtful applications and for taking the time out of what I'm sure is a really busy week for the next 6 weeks to learn and to connect with other people. I'm really looking forward to hearing from each and every one of you in the next 6 weeks and to see you all in October at the April conference. So why don't we go ahead and everybody can introduce themselves. So I ask that you share your name, your pronouns if you'd like to, but you don't have to if you don't want to, where you're from, and what your favorite season is. That would be season of the year, spring, summer, fall, winter. So I will, you know, most of that about me, but I am from Massachusetts. And my favorite season is probably fall. Mostly just because like the nice sweet spot of weather. It's A+. All right, I'm gonna go to who I see next. I'm gonna go to Jaden.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Jaden. From Logan, Utah. Personally, I don't use pronouns, but that's just me. I think favorite season. I think I'd probably have to say spring and or even no, actually, I think fall is probably one of my favorite times just because of stuff that comes up, Halloween, the hunting season, football, stuff like that. But yeah, that's all I got.
Awesome. Jaden, thank you for sharing. Also a big fan of Halloween.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go next to Andy.
Hi there. My name's Andy Padilla. I'm from Northern California. Currently, I'm in Humboldt County, kind of famous for the redwoods and the forest moon of Endor from Star Wars. My favorite season's probably early summer. That's kind of when it's nicest in California. Yeah. What were the other questions? Abby?
The last one you didn't do is pronouns, which you can share if you want to or not if you don't want to.
And he, him. Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. Next I will go to Erica.
My hi name is Hika. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from New York, and I would say my favorite season is summer. But as I get older, that's kind of changing because summer is changing. So yeah.
So fair. Erica, before we move on to the next person, would you be willing to tell everybody what your role is here these next 6 weeks?
Oh yeah. I don't know what my. I guess I'm a mentor, so
Yes.
I'm just here to like answer questions because I did this last year.
Yes. So Erica, and then we have one other mentor, Riley, with us, and they will both be here to answer questions, offer guidance, and to just, they will also be some of the people reading or looking at folks' journals. So we can talk more about that later. But I'm going to go next to Jordan.
Hi everyone, I'm Jordan. I use she, her pronouns. Um, I'm from the Carolinas. I've recently moved from South Carolina to North Carolina, but I'm currently in the Charlotte area. And my favorite season is also fall. I love the spooky season, and I am excited for it not to be incredibly hot in a couple of weeks, hopefully.
Me too. Thank you, Jordan. Next is Jeremiah.
Hi, I'm Jeremiah Johnson. My favorite season is probably fall. I really like Halloween, like wearing hoodies and stuff. I really like it. And for my pronouns, I think it's he, him. I'm not really sure. And
Oh,
I'm from Utah.
thank you, Jeremiah. Got a group of fall enjoyers around here. Riley.
My name is Riley Hurt. I use she, her pronouns. I am from the Salem, Oregon area, so along the West Coast. And I'm going to mix things up a little bit and say that my favorite season is fall. Or not fall, spring. Thank you. It's been a long day.
Yes.
And I am also a mentor. I am excited to join everyone for these next couple of weeks and then end up in California. And just a little bit more about my background. I'm studying public health, and I have been doing disability advocacy for a while now. I'm third generation in my family to have a disability, so it's kind of something that I've learned throughout my life. So I'm excited to help everyone, and yeah.
Thank you very much, Riley. We're happy to have you. I'm gonna go next to Rachel.
My name is Rachel Baca. I go by she, her, and I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And pretty soon coming up will be fiestas next month that Santa Fe is really popular for, and their green chili. And also, my favorite seasons are summer and fall. I like wearing warm and cool clothes. So, yeah.
I was in Santa Fe a few months ago for work, and I had the best green chili enchiladas I have ever eaten in my entire life. So I hopefully someday will be back to eat them again. Um, thank you, Rachel. I'm gonna go to Elicity.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, well, my name is Elicity. My pronouns are she, her. My favorite season is winter. I really like Christmas. I'm big on holidays and being around family and things like that. So we get together at Christmas. Um, and I am from Indiana.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing, Elicity. I also, for what it's worth, love Christmas. So I feel that. I would love winter if it wasn't for having to clean the snow off my car.
That's the
Ash.
worst.
Oh, yes.
Hi everyone, my name is Ash. My pronouns are he, him, and they, them. I currently live in Oakland, and I'm a youth program coordinator at the CIL in Berkeley. And yeah, nice to see some familiar faces. Oh, favorite season is fall, like everyone else. I love fall and the leaves and everything.
Thank you, Ash. We're happy to have you. I'm gonna call next on Laura Lee.
Hi, my name is Laura Lee, and my favorite season is winter.
Excellent. Laura Lee, where are you from? And if you would like to, you can share your pronouns.
Idaho. I'm from Idaho. I use she, her.
Thank you, Laura Lee. We're really happy to have you. Who haven't I called on? Naomi.
Hi everyone, my name is Naomi. I use she, her pronouns. My favorite season is fall. And I'm from Washington State. Yeah, the West Coast, not the East Coast. So yeah, I'm excited to be here.
I know a young woman from Vancouver, Washington, and every time she introduced herself, she tells us that she is from Washington, the state, not DC. Very important to her. So I wonder if that is a Washington State like identity thing. So
We get
far, I think
confused a lot. That's why it's a thing.
that's
We're
so
like,
fair.
we're state. Yes. And also a lot of people have booked tickets to come to DC and they accidentally booked to Washington State. So
Oh
now I try and say
no.
it to people. It's like, no, the other one. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Naomi. I'm gonna go to Honora. I might be having some.
I'm from Idaho. Where the potatoes grow. It's hard to pick a favorite season, but I love winter because it's cold and snowy, and I love the cold and the snow.
I love that you love that. That makes me, I'm glad somebody loves it. That's important. Honora,
So,
I
those are
think, okay. We're having a bit of a connection delay, I think. So we missed the beginning of your introduction.
potatoes grow. And I use they them pronouns. Did it work this time?
Mostly. I think we missed we got the part that we missed. So I'm glad
Okay.
for that.
All right.
Right. Next I'll go to Cecile.
I'm from Idaho, and yeah, it's very hot today. I just went pick up my daughter and take her somewhere to watch her, and then return back to office. That's why I'm like 10 minutes late. I'm sorry for being late.
You are okay, no worries. We're glad you're here. Cecile, could you share with us your favorite season and if you would like to share your pronouns?
My favorite season is fall because it's not hot and then also it's not cold. It's just in the middle, and I use she, her pronouns.
Thank you, Cecile. Okay, then I'll go to Lavender.
Hi, my name is Lavender. I use she, they pronouns. Also, if you saw me first join the meeting, I occasionally go by Aylin about once a week. That's my D&D name. I thought it was so funny that I forgot to change that before I joined the meeting. I am from Massachusetts. And I think my body's favorite season is fall. But I don't know that I have a favorite season. I think there's something that I enjoy about all of the seasons. But temperature-wise, definitely fall.
Excellent. Thank you. And last but not least, Emily.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can go after. I'm sorry for joining late.
Oh, no, you're fine. Don't worry. Hi, Shika. I'm glad you're
Oh,
here.
I was eating dinner. I'm sorry. Okay.
That's okay. So second to last, and neither are least, go Emily, and then we'll go to Shika.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name's Emily Robinson. I live in Grantsville, West Virginia. I don't know that my body has a favorite season. It's got some issues with all of them. But if we're going based off of like what we like the best, I would say fall. I like Halloween and decorating because I can go a lot of ways with the decoration.
Excellent. Decorations are, I never have the energy to do it myself, but driving around and seeing everybody else's is a very good part of the Halloween season. All right. Erica says, my body hates all seasons equally.
Yes, I agree. And then was there any other questions that I missed?
Did you say your pronouns if you wanted to?
She, her.
Cool. Okay, and then so we're gonna go to Shika. Shika, if you could share your name, your pronouns if you'd like, where you're from, and then your favorite season.
Hi, this is Shika. I'm sorry again for joining late. I'll try to get better at this because it'll be a couple weeks. But pronouns are she, her, and I'm in the case management field as a social worker. And I like the fall season because of my birthday and because I'm warm nature. I like the cool weather, so fall or winter. Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing and for being here.
I'm from Georgia. I'm sorry about that. I forgot. I'm from Georgia.
That's okay. Well, we're glad you're here. So I'm gonna introduce you to our speakers this evening. But really briefly before we do that, y'all should have gotten an email. You've probably gotten a lot of emails from me, for which I am both sorry and not, I guess. Because you needed them, but most of you have worked through your travel with me already. If you haven't, let's make sure we connect this week about it. Please feel free to call or email me. And then after this class, y'all will be submitting journals. And I sent in an email who you would be submitting your journal to. So if you have any questions about that, make sure you let one of us know. All right, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mary Willard and Marcia Katz. Mary Willard is our Director of Training and Technical Assistance here at April. And then Marcia, I don't know how you would like to be introduced. So maybe I'll let you go for it.
Okay, Mary, were you going to introduce yourself first or am I going to?
You go ahead.
Okay, well, the first thing that y'all need to know about me is I'm old as dirt. And I'm living in Montana now, but originally from Michigan. And I have worked in disability rights for more years than any of you have been alive, at least over 45 years now. So that's why I'm old as dirt. So a lot of the things, that we talk about in the history piece many of those are things that I have sort of lived through and or been part of. In addition to my work in disability rights, both at a local ARC and also at the University of Montana, I have been a member for over 30 years now of ADAPT. I don't know if any of you are familiar with ADAPT, but it's a disability rights activist organization. So the things that I have done are both kind of in the streets and in the suites, as we say. I also years ago wrote an advocacy manual for on SSI and Social Security disability. That was something that I had a great deal of expertise in, and at one time had an advocacy manual, which is way out of date right now. But so that's something that I have a lot of experience with. And I also served on something called the Social Security Advisory Board in Washington, D.C. which is a 7-member board that is comprised of 3 Democrats and, well, that's not true. 3 people appointed by the Senate, 3 people appointed by the House, and the president has 1 appointment. And whoever's in power gets to pick who the chair is and which party has the majority on the board. But, we've written a lot of reports. My pronouns are she, her. And my favorite season, unlike most of you, although except for one, I think, is spring. Both because it's the time of my birthday, but it's also the time that the earth wakes up and everything starts to get green again in the places where I've lived. And so, it's something that is just really, I feel it. I don't just like it, I feel it when it happens.
Thank you, Marcia. All right. So I'm Mary Willard. My pronouns are she, her. And I don't even know if Abby knows this. So the Lead On program actually was once upon a dream that my colleague and I came up with in Marcia and her late husband Bob's basement. And lead on is a phrase that Justin Dart Jr. used to end all of his speeches with. I think it was that he really did love everybody, and that he, really did want everybody to carry on and lead on. And also, just a way to kind of build community. And it actually, once upon a time, stood for learn your history, empowerment, advocacy, disability organizing, and networking. And it's just really exciting for me to get to present with Marcia today. And I am incredibly intimidated because Marcia is who really inundated me into disability history and culture as a very, very young woman. And now I am very not young anymore. And so I just hope that it helps light a fire in all of you to continue to do amazing things. I can tell you're all doing amazing things now. But I guess with that, we'll just kind of get started. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to try to do our best to get to all the questions. But we really just, want to share our love of history and culture with you.
And just to add on to that, Mary, I want people to know we are barely scratching the surface on disability history. Yes. This is just, like a taste, and hopefully all of you will dive in more as you want to, or as you go through life.
Yes. And when Marcia and I were trying to put this together, we were like, we need 3 weeks. But we have what we have. And so we'll get started. I don't know, Abby, do you just want me to, or we probably don't need a screen share. Do you just want me to go, or, okay, got it. I wasn't sure.
Oh, there you go. I was just waiting for the correct moment and then I found it.
Awesome. Well, so this is Disability History and Disability Culture, Foundation for Rights. Next slide. So disability history, many of you probably know, started in I like to call it the dark ages. It was during this medical model type idea that people with disabilities were useless, unable to contribute to society, people to be feared, the objects of sympathy or pity. Many of you, maybe you knew of things like telethons, or we used to call it pity porn. I don't know if that's what y'all still call it, but really just putting people with disabilities out there in that pitying light. There also in the early 1900s was the euthanasia movement, along with the sterilization movement. Sir Francis Galton came up with this idea that, didn't want disability passed on. And so they would sterilize people against their will. And then really this whole idea of being broken and needing to be fixed. Next slide. And Marcia, just jump in whenever, because I know you have things to add. Oh, and then we get to the institutions. I I know we can't really see each other, but I don't know if people, I want to know later if anybody here has heard of Willowbrook. So this says, once upon a time in a land not so far away, there was an institution called Willowbrook. And I don't know, Marcia, would you maybe want to jump in and
Sure.
give us the Willowbrook overview?
Like most institutions, it was a horrible place. And people, I mean, it's basically like being locked up in a prison, except in prison, you have a release date, and in an institution, you never did. The conditions were horrible. Many times people were deprived of clothing. There might be, just everybody walking around naked. You never know. You could be lying in your own waste. People would have their clothing taken to get washed on one day, and they'd get different clothing back, at the end of the week. People weren't fed. They were abused, both physically and verbally and sexually. And there was one person in Willowbrook who got in touch with Geraldo Rivera, who he used to be a journalist. I don't know if he gets still called a journalist or not. But anyway, he went to Willowbrook with a camera, and it was literally on TV, and broke it open. And at that point, there were court cases, and there was what's called a special master appointed, who oversaw trying to move people then out of Willowbrook and into the community in supportive settings in the community. And that was, sort of one of the beginnings of deinstitutionalization. Go ahead, Mayor.
Thanks, Marcia. Next slide. Oh, and along with institutionalization, there was just really this age of exclusion. There were segregated schools. There was lack of accessible transportation. There wasn't even curb cuts. We're going to talk a little bit about how we got those. And really, institutionalization for everyone. You didn't see people with apparent disabilities out in the community. One story I remember, I met a gentleman named Richard Pimentel. He was doing a conference with me, and he was telling me a story about the ugly laws. So there were laws everywhere, all across the country, that said basically if you looked different or acted differently, that people could ask you to leave, and if you refused, you could be thrown in jail. And Richard likes to tell the story of him and his friend Art, who had cerebral palsy, who went one day. I think there's somebody on this call from Oregon, right? They were in Oregon, and they went to go and have some pancakes. And the waitress asked them to leave, and Art basically said, no, I want pancakes. And so she called the cops. And I think the kicker of that story is that Art said that they served him pancakes in jail. So he got pancakes, but really, they then went around and started pushing a lot on these ugly laws. And I'm sure Marcia knows there was probably a lot of people. That's just one story that stuck out in my head.
One of the other things that I want to throw in from the last slide about the sterilization is that when the forced sterilization first started, it was started because it was thought that disability was being passed down genetically. And so if they sterilized the women in institute, they didn't do this to the men, they did this to the women primarily. If they sterilized the women in institutions, that would stop disability from being passed down genetically. What they didn't know at the time, and wasn't discovered until probably the late 1900s, was that the disabilities in the cases that they were looking at, there was a famous case called Buck versus Bell, and Carrie Buck, who was sterilized, was one of the first where they did a lawsuit. But there was also a particular family that they used as an example, that there were people with disabilities generation after generation. What they didn't find out until the late 1900s was that it wasn't genetic. It was because the parents were first, like the grandparents were alcoholic, abused alcohol, and so their kids were born with fetal alcohol syndrome, and then they abused alcohol and their kids were born with fetal alcohol syndrome, and so on and so on. So there were generations of people who in fact did have disabilities, but not genetically. It was more because of social behavior.
Thank you, Marcia. See, I'm even going to learn something new too. Next slide. So then we're going to move into an age of the advent of independent living. And I think it's really important, and Marcia is the one who taught me this, that there is actually a distinction between the independent living movements and the disability rights movements. They moved, you know, in circles kind of tangentially, but they really were two different movements. So the advent of the independent living movement, you know, really there was a whole bunch of different influences. There was the civil rights movements, the self-help movement, the women's movement, deinstitutionalization, like Marcia was talking about with Willowbrook. There was the consumer movement, and you know, just this idea that disability, we wanted to also just throw this out there, that disability is equal opportunity, and that really we found in the early days that cross-organizing to build a stronger movement with all groups seeking social justice as the outcome got better results. And we're going to talk a little more about that in a little bit. I know Marcia has some great stories just of how different civil rights movements really led to the disability rights movement. Next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about the adventures of Ed and Judy. I was excited to hear somebody is on this call today from the SIL. So Ed Roberts was the first person with a significant disability to attend UC Berkeley. He had to live in Cowell Infirmary, which was the hospital, because it was the only semi-accessible place on the whole campus. He also helped establish the rolling quads. So we talked a little bit about how there was not even any curb cuts before. Ed Roberts and the rolling quads, they went out on what they called night ops, and you know, they would bring their tools and sledgehammers, and all kinds of people would basically break up the sidewalks of where they wanted to go, because the city, they had advocated to get an ordinance passed that said that if a sidewalk breaks, they would put in a curb cut. And well, you know, sidewalks are made of cement, and they got tired of waiting, so they decided to take things in their own hands. And this is also where the Physically Disabled Students Program was established as the federal pilot program, and money from the city. And Marcia, you might, I don't know if you want to correct me or not, but I believe that this students program from UC Berkeley then really spun off to be the first SIL.
Basically, yeah. And I had the pleasure of knowing Ed Roberts. We were in the organization called TASH together, and we actually created a little bit of trouble every now and then together, but he was just a wonderful, amazing man. And one of the things that I loved about Ed was that he never felt bad about his disability. And Ed had polio. He was born with polio, and he lived most of his life in an iron lung, which was how polio was treated way back in the 50s and 60s. And he went all over the world in airplanes in that iron lung. It was amazing. But he said that because of that, his disability, and despite the iron lung that he traveled in, that he got to meet heads of state all over the world and have experiences that he never would have had without having his disability.
Next slide, please. Marcia, do you want to take up where the adventure continues?
I can, if you like. So Judy Heumann just passed away recently, and many of you may have heard her name before. Some of you may have seen the movie Crip Camp that she was in. That's been, you know, popular for the last couple of years now, and was nominated for an Academy Award even. And Judy had graduated from the Long Island University with her teaching degree, but in the state of New York, they wouldn't license her to teach, and so she sued the Board of Education. She won, and she was hired by her former grade school. And then she started an organization called Disability in Action, or DIA, which was both an advocacy and activist organization to address a lot of the inequities that people with disabilities were experiencing. Next slide, please. And then after that, she went to work with Ed at the SIL. And did you want to take over on this one, Mary? I don't know if you weren't wanting to do this one or if you want me to do it.
No, go for it.
Okay, so in 1972, Ed started the Center for Independent Living with some federal money, some money from the university, Berkeley, and 10% of the staff poker club, which was always a funny thing to hear about. And right after that, Judy moved to California and she joined the SIL. And so the two of them worked together for a lot of years. Ultimately, Judy ended up going to the World Institute on Disability, which we don't have in here, I don't think, and leading that, and went into administration of a couple of presidents, and then to the World Bank. She just did amazing things, and I encourage everybody to either read her autobiography or Google her and find out more about her life. In 1977, Judy led protests against the Health, Education, and Welfare Department, as it was called then, to finalize rules for Section 504 of the Rehab Act. The Rehab Act was passed in 1973, and that was supposed to help a whole lot with a lot of accessibility and a lot of services for people with disabilities, but it couldn't be implemented until the regulations were written. And the regulations kept not being written. And so finally, in 1977, Judy led a protest against health, education, and welfare in San Francisco. And it was actually the longest occupation of a federal building in history. There's never been a longer occupation. It was over a month. Next slide, please.
Marcia, can I add, one of my favorite stories from the 504 sit-ins is, well, I have lots of favorite stories, but they finally got a special congressional hearing, and there wasn't even really great accessible transportation then. And so they loaded up in the backs of U-Haul trucks and drove from California to Washington, D.C. In order to speak at this special congressional hearing.
And there's a film that you can Google on 504. You can Google the film on YouTube and watch that, and it will show Judy's testimony before that congressional committee, and it was very powerful. And right after that, in fact, the regulations did get written.
We actually have that link on the back resource slide for you.
Great.
I wanted to ask really quickly before we keep going. Can I know by a show of hands or the raise hand button in Zoom, who amongst us has seen the film Crip Camp? Okay, if you haven't seen it, I believe is it still on Netflix? Yes. I don't give homework for this group other than your journals, but if you are looking for something to do this weekend, it is a really, really great representation of a lot of the things that we're talking about tonight, including a lot of, personal stories straight from the mouths of some of these folks we're talking about.
So the one thing that I would just add about that film, Abby, which is it's a great film. It primarily deals with physical disability, though. Mm-hmm. So there are other films and other resources that are cross disability or for other disabilities, and those are all things that if any of you have any particular interest in any of those, I have a library of things, and I could suggest things, or you can ask us and see if there's something we can respond with, because we'd love to hook you up with any resources that you might be interested in.
I mean, I would be happy to hear anything you've got, Marcia.
Well, it looks like Andy just put a YouTube link to Crip Camp, which is even better than Netflix because it doesn't cost anything.
Excellent.
Thank you, Andy.
All right. Ash, I saw your hand up. Did you have a question or a comment, or is it just up from talking about Crip Camp?
Oh, no. Thought that was my raise hand function, but I didn't.
Perfect,
lower
it is.
But
I
I also
just wanted
have,
to make sure I
a
wasn't
bunch of
missing anything.
information. Yeah, I met Judy Human and Denise Jacobson from Cook Camp. So yeah, really wonderful people.
Amen.
Right. Andy.
I had a question. You referred to Judy Human speaking at a congressional hearing. Is that separate from the two congressmen who came to the occupied building, or is that a additional hearing?
Yeah, no, it was the two congressmen came and may have listened to people there and had something that was informal, but the hearing in Washington, D.C. was a very formal hearing, just like the hearings that you hear about now for different reasons. Where Judy was asked to come, and there was a small contingent that went with her, and where they actually testified in Washington, D.C. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks for that clarification.
Awesome. All right, I will stop interrupting and we will get back to the presentation.
Marcia, if you want to take us through to the end of the pitchfork model, I just think I love hearing you describe it.
Well, this, in terms of the disability rights, Wade Blank is certainly one of the heroes there, and he was a minister in Ohio, and he was working actually at Kent State University. And if any of you have heard of the Kent State shootings, which was quite a few years ago, where there were students killed by the National Guard, and Wade, who had marched with Martin Luther King in the South, got so disillusioned by everything that he left Ohio and the university there and went to Colorado, where he got a job as a recreational director in the youth wing of a nursing home. It was all full of young people. And there was one particular guy named Mike Smith that he helped to move out into his own apartment, and then he provided a lot of the personal assistance for him. The nursing home fired him for his efforts to help residents move out into their own homes. And after that, he met somebody called Mike Auberger, and the two of them together started ADAPT out of the Atlantis. Well, Atlantis was born sort of, and then ADAPT kind of all at the same time. And at the time, there was what's called the Gang of 19, which was 19 people with disabilities who blocked streets in Denver, Colorado, and blocked the streets so that buses, where the bus stops were, they blocked the buses so the buses could not move, because the buses were not accessible to people. And there was no accessible transportation. And this was way before the ADA. This was, at least 10 years before that. And there was even Pat Schroeder, who was a congresswoman at the time, even came out and brought them coffee and donuts and things, and helped support their protest there. As a result of that, Denver, Colorado became the first city in the country to establish accessibility in buses and in transportation. And if you ever go to Denver, there is on that corner where they blocked the buses, there is a memorial stone there that talks about the Gang of 19. So ADAPT is, as I mentioned in my introduction, is a disability rights activist organization. And we use civil disobedience to achieve our goals. And civil disobedience is one prong on the pitchfork model that ADAPT also uses. Next slide, please. So the pitchfork model is that we use political action, we use legal action, we use systemic and administrative pressure, media and education through media, and direct action. So there are all kinds of ways of working for change. It's not just one way or another. And that's why when I talk about, in the suites and the streets, some of it is, being in meetings with policymakers and politicians. And some of the rest of it is filing lawsuits against things like the whether it's ADA was political action and passing a bill, but the Olmstead decision by the Supreme Court is an example of legal action. Media is a huge tool, and often in ADAPT, we've gotten a media exposure because of our direct action, because of our protests. And the reason for that is that in the disability community, there aren't a lot of us that have a lot of money. There aren't a lot of us that have a lot of power. And so direct action is something that can get the attention of the media and therefore get our issues out in the open and get exposure and hopefully educate people to those things, and then also put pressure on the policy makers and the people who are making the decisions about our lives. And part of what we do with direct action is also demanding a place at the table, and not just something that's a token place at the table, but something that's a meaningful place at the table, because there are decisions being made about our lives at those tables. Next slide. So this is something, I'm glad you put this in, Mary, because I wasn't sure we had this. People need to know that there is a disability history project going on right now. There are a group of people, there are over 200 people on the email list right now from all over the country that are trying to establish a disability museum of some kind, virtual, and then eventually something physical. And so there are just a lot of people with a lot of ideas, a lot of information. It's kind of being collated. If any of you are interested in participating, we can absolutely get your names added to the email list for that. So, please let us know. But there are so many people that have been part of the history and future of both independent living and disability rights. One of the things Mary and I talked about a lot yesterday is the fact that so much of disability history, and even what we've told you today so far, has been written by primarily cis, hetero, white people, mostly male and some female. And there hasn't been a lot of representation from a lot of other marginalized groups or the intersectionality that's represented in the disability community. So that's something that absolutely is needing more help. There are people today that are working very hard to get more of that included. One of the things that I can tell you in terms of history, I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of people from non-white communities that have contributed. You heard a little bit about the 504 sit-ins. And one of the people who was in the 504 in the sit-in at the HEW building was Brad Lomax. And he was also a member of the Black Panther Party. He had multiple sclerosis, and he was one of the people who also went to Washington, D.C. with Judy Heumann. But he got his brothers and sisters in the Black Panthers to help with the 504 sit-in, and they provided a lot of the food and other kinds of support. And the folks that stayed inside that building for a month could not have done that without the Black Panthers. And the Black Panthers were, very well known for establishing breakfast programs and other kinds of things in their community, and contributing to their communities. Another example, there was somebody who I knew in ADAPT years ago whose name was Lyle Baldeagle. He was a Lakota from Pine Ridge and was part of an organization called the Quad Squad. And the Quad Squad sort of evolved into an amateur lobbying group with primary emphasis on transportation and mobility, because it was, on their reservation, it was very hard to get from one place to another to do anything. And so they wanted to influence positive change without blaming. So there were a number of people with disabilities that were part of that, including somebody named Marlon Weston, who was the president of the Quad Squad, and Rebecca Yellowhair was the vice president there. And they did a lot of advocacy at a state level in Pierre, the capital there. And Lyle, when he was in Washington, D.C. with us for ADAPT Action, also stayed after and lobbied in Congress to try to get some changes made. So those are just two examples of people that were also part of the movement. And one other thing that I would add in terms of collaborating with other organizations is that many years ago during the AIDS epidemic, AIDS and HIV, there was a huge march in Washington, and people who are LGBTQIA and Two-Spirit were all there with the quilt. And I don't know if any of you have ever heard about the quilt or seen it, but people made quilt squares for friends and relatives who had died from AIDS, and including people that I knew personally. And that happened during right on the tail. I'm trying to think if that was before or after an ADAPT action, but whichever way, it didn't matter, because there were people that came for the march in Washington with the quilt who then stayed for the ADAPT action, and there were people from ADAPT who came early and were part of the protests that were going on when the quilt was out on the mall. So, and the last one we've got here is when Gallaudet University was hiring a new president one time, it hired somebody who was not deaf and did not speak ASL, did not use ASL. And folks from Howard University, which was a Black college that was nearby, helped in that protest. And it was called the Deaf President Now movement. And there's a great book that was written as a result of that. And ultimately, they did end up hiring, they fired the first person they'd hired and hired a deaf president. And I think that has continued since. So those were just examples also of some of the crossing over and the collaborating and coalitions that get built around various kinds of issues. Next slide.
I'm going to step in one more time.
Yeah, go ahead.
April is offering, we're offering a webinar on September 12th. It's a Tuesday. And goodness gracious, if I could remember what time it's at, let me look. It is at 2 p.m. Eastern. So that's 1 Central, noon Mountain, 11 a.m. Pacific. I did it, I think. I'll get better. By the end of the 6 weeks, I'll be great. Which is LGBTQIA+ and independent living, parallel and intersecting movements. So it's going to be a 90-minute webinar, free to attend, and I can send out the info if any of you are available and interested. We have 2 members of the LGBTQ community, one who has a disability, one who does not, who are going to be presenting together on how our 2 movements have intersected throughout history. So that's, again, enough from me.
Wonderful. We just threw this slide in here. It's titled Be the Change, because we wanted to, I guess, challenge and put some thoughts in your head about when you're going to be at the conference. And so when we're all together in California, we hope that each of you can take some time to reach out to somebody and ask them to tell you a person or a story that they think is an important part of our shared history. Towards the latter part of our presentation, Marcia and I are going to talk a little bit about culture, but the really neat thing about our culture, I think, is the sharing of stories. And so we just hope that you're able to do that. And the other sort of challenge that we have for you all is please do reach out. We would love to be able to connect you in however we can, so that you can help us rewrite history from those many different perspectives. So we have a really great diverse group of folks here today. And we hope this lights a fire within you, that you do help us do some research to really help flush out that narrative so that it comes from more perspectives. Next slide. Awesome. And I see Marcia replying in the chat. Thanks, Marcia. Marcia has a treasure trove of resources. I have had the pleasure of studying in Marcia's basement. So this is From Advocacy to Activism. So this is just an addition to the timeline that we started earlier. In 1935, the League for the Physically Handicapped staged a 9-day sit-in at the Public Works program in New York City. for discrimination against people with disabilities in employment. In 1949, the ARC was started. In 1972, Disability in Action, the Paralyzed Vets Association, and others rallied at the Lincoln Memorial for the Rehab Act passage. And again, I don't know if you remember, so the Rehab Act, we kind of go interchangeably. So 504, when we say that, we actually are also referring to the Rehab Act. And in 1977, the 504 demonstrations in San Francisco for 28 days, Chicago, New York, Washington, D.C., and other protests, Carter administration and the Health Education Welfare Office for not passing regulations related to Section 504. And that again is what we were talking about earlier. So while they were having the giant sit-in in California, there were other sit-ins going on across the country in tandem. Marcia, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I forgot what I was going to add first, but what I will say is that that some of the advocacy part of things started after disabled veterans came back from World War I, and then continued into again in World War II. There were other things that happened, but I think it was in the 30s also where the blind community did some amazing lobbying that got all kinds of things passed that exist today that are not afforded to people with other disabilities. So we've got a lot to learn from the history of the blind community.
Awesome. Next slide, please. And so this just goes on. Marcia mentioned earlier the Gang of 19, which was that first group at the Atlantis community in Denver, and that was in 1978 when they took over the city bus in Denver. After stonewalling those lifts on the buses. And in 1983, ADAPT had continued to take on that public transportation until the ADA passed in 1990. And then they moved to changing Medicaid institutional bias in long-term care. I know that Marcia has lots of stories about this. Back in the day, the fight for the Medicaid institutional bias was MACASA. Marcia and her husband led a very important march from the, what was it, Marcia, the Independence March? I can't remember.
Well, no, it was my husband, Bob, was one of the co-chairs of it, and it was the Free Our People March. And we took 2 weeks to march 144 miles from the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia to Capitol Hill. And we camped out every night. There were tents that went up every night and got taken down every morning. We had 10 accessible porta potties that came with us on the route and stopped with us for lunch and then for dinner and then all night long. We had a big container of water that came with us that people could use for washing on the road. We camped in church parking lots, on streets. One of our camping sites was a state police post, the acreage next to them. But at one night we were in the skating rink in Baltimore, Maryland, and it was an ice skating rink, which didn't have ice at the time, but we woke up in the morning to this totally green glow, and everybody was wet because it was very wet in there, even though there wasn't any ice. And so that was a very strange thing. And there were a lot of churches that did dinner for us along the way. It was an amazing trip. In the beginning, there were 150 people, probably 100 who used wheelchairs. And then for the last bit from Baltimore to DC, we were joined by another 100 people that came in, and we had a big rally in Washington, DC at the end of it. When I wanted to just say, I don't know if people understand what Medicaid institutional bias is. And so I just want to explain that real quick. In the Medicaid program, if a state participates in Medicaid, and now all of the states do, at one time, all of the states didn't, but they all do now, there are certain things that you have to offer if you participate in the Medicaid program. And there are other things that are optional that you can choose to offer. In the Medicaid program, one of the things that you have to offer are nursing homes and institutions for people with developmental disabilities. And we were trying, actually, even in the 80s, those of us in TASH, like Ed Roberts and myself and Bob Williams and some other people, were working to get Medicaid changed then so that money could be redirected from institutions to community-based housing for people, particularly those with developmental disabilities at the time. But then after the ADA passed and ADAPT started working on changing Medicaid, not only was it trying to provide funding so people didn't get forced into institutions because the states had to provide institutions, but so that people could have a choice and have their funding cover the expenses that they had in the community as well. When we say Medicaid institutional bias, it's because that's what's built into the Medicaid program currently and what we've tried to change. We made some progress for that some years ago with a program called Money Follows the Person. And at the time, we were protesting at the White House. We were, all chained to the gate at the White House. And I think it was President W. Bush that sent out Mark McClellan, who was on his staff, to talk to us, to see what was going on and talk to us. And Mark McClellan listened to us. And a few years later, he got appointed to head the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare. And so he was one of the people that helped us to work for Money Follows the Person, which would be that people moving out of an institution could have money, or nursing home, which is a kind of institution, could have money follow them into the community to help cover their costs there. And he even credited ADAPT with that on the on NPR one time in an interview. In addition to that, there was more done in that vein in the Affordable Care Act. And at the time, Max Baucus, who was the senior senator from Montana, here in Montana, held a discussion in our public library with people from our independent living center here, Summit Independent Living. And my husband, Bob, and the director at the time, Mike, and Travis, I think was a head of advocacy. They all talked to Senator Baucus about this, and he put in the Affordable Care Act in what's called the chairman's mark, where he was authoring some of these things, that he automatically included Money Follows the Person in there. And so there, we have a little bit of pride here in Montana for helping to make that happen.
I just learned that story myself the other day.
Do you want to talk about the Gallaudet, or?
Sure. I'll take us through the rest of this one. We already sort of mentioned that that the students shut down Gallaudet University. Again, that was when we were talking about how Howard had come over and helped. After that shutdown is when they hired I. King Jordan, who was the first deaf president. There's a really neat show. We put a link to it in the end called Lives Worth Living. And it actually documents the many different movements that were going on. So there was the independent living movement, the disability rights movement. There was also the mental health survivors movement with Judy Chamberlain and folks. There was like the Deaf President Now and I. King Jordan. And the Lives Worth Living DVD, it really shows many different leaders. I really enjoyed it myself. And then we have, I'm going to skip over the Capitol Crawl Up because we're going to talk about the next slide. But we have the Capitol Crawl Up in 1990, and then 91. Jerry Lewis Telethon, Jerry's Orphans began to protest the MDA telethon. Really, again, that being this pity model, and people with disabilities wanting to move towards more pride. And then 1996 to now, the Not Dead Yet protests against physician-induced death and euthanasia. I don't know if has anybody here heard of the Not Dead Yet group? Maybe like show of hands, or.
I want people to know that the name of the organization, and my husband Bob and I were there literally at the very beginning, and when the name first happened, that comes from a Monty Python film. And so there's some tongue-in-cheek stuff there too. So
I didn't know that.
Yep. somebody was going around collecting bodies in a Monty Python film. I forget which one. I mean, Monty Python films are all comedies. And somebody said, I'm not dead yet. And so anyway, and there it was, and there it began.
Awesome. Abby says, ever since I learned about this group, I always wondered. Next slide.
Yeah, it may have been the Holy Grail. I think you're right. Was that Lavender that just said that? Yeah, I think you're right.
We just added this. You should have seen it in Technicolor. I forgot to add the extra, but these are some photos. The first one is of the 504 sit-in. And the second photo is of the fight for ADA during the Capitol crawl-up steps, or the Capitol crawl-up of the steps. And I put a link in here to the Tom Olin collection. So some of you might even know Tom. He's still at it, joining our meetings and helping us fight the good fight. And he actually chronicled a lot of the disability rights movement in photos. And this link will take you to a lot of those.
And some of those photos are in both the Smithsonian Institute, and there are also photos that are in the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis. And we had a special showing of those one time when we were protesting down there. It was pretty amazing.
And essentially the crawl-up was where people were literally throwing themselves out of their chairs and crawling up the steps. If you watch little video clips of it, you can see congressmen kind of peeking out of the windows, and some folks saying, we're inconvenienced for most of our lives having to go into inaccessible buildings, and they can be inconvenienced for one day, because they were grumpy that they couldn't use the steps because there was people crawling up them.
Well, and at the time they were discussing ADA on the floor of Congress. And so, it has been said that this helped throw the balance over and pass the tipping point, and then the ADA was passed.
And while we're talking about the fight for ADA, we briefly mentioned Justin Dart Jr., but he deserves a little more fleshing out of his story. So Justin Dart actually was a huge part of the ADA getting passed. He traveled around the country, I think, Marcia, was it 4 times on his own dime?
He traveled to every state in the union and collecting testimony.
And he put together these stories, and he would gather them from people with disabilities. He would gather them from advocates, from people working in the field, and he put them all together, and they were called the Discrimination Diaries. And essentially just outlining the different ways that people with disabilities across the country were experiencing discrimination and why we needed the ADA.
He was also, for people who don't know about Justin Dart or don't know a whole lot, most of you have probably heard of Tupperware. And Justin Dart is part of the Tupperware family. And he was over in Japan starting something there with Tupperware, and he was using his wheelchair at the time. And he met his wife Yoshiko, who was then his partner in everything. They were just a serious power couple, amazing people. And I love knowing both of them. So he used his money all for good.
And he really was a political person. And what he did really well was he played both sides. So he was able to really talk to conservative politicians from the standpoint of why disability rights and the ADA was the right thing to do.
And he was one of the few people with disabilities that had money. So that gave him sort of entree to some of those people, and they, listened to him.
I have to say, Yoshiko is a wonderful person, and I hope that many of you get to meet her if you have not yet. And she actually has always been a huge supporter of April.
And of youth.
And I was going to add, and of youth. That's why she's been a huge support of April. So April has actually been a part of the youth movement for a long time. It started, with the National Youth Leadership Network, or NYLN, and Yoshiko was really a big supporter of that. And then Yoshiko used to always come to our youth conference and really support the youth, because she really understands that, we can only do this for so long, and it's important to bring in other people.
And she and Justin often marched with ADAPT when we were in Washington, D.C. too. So, they had a lot of political connections, but they were also right out in the streets with us.
Next slide. And we're going to read this slide, and then we're going to take a short break for a seventh inning stretch, if you will, before we just give a very brief nod to culture. Again, I encourage you all to just, dive in yourselves as well. There's so much information, and we're going to barely scratch the surface. But this slide just says that is where we come from, and here's where we are, and more importantly, where we're going. So we'll take what do you think, Abby?
Let's come back for, I don't know, 25 minutes after the hour. Does that feel okay to folks?
So like a 10-minute break?
Yeah, about a 10-minute break.
So 10 minutes, whatever time zone you're in.
All right. Feel free to do what you got to do, stretch, use the bathroom, etc. I'll stop sharing, and we will be back in 10 minutes.
Ooh. And then Abby, if you want to go to the next slide when we start back up.
You got it.
Marsha, I think we're going to hit our time.
We might get through it. It's true. I've been thinking the same thing.
Mary, is Tom registered for the conference? Does he come?
He usually comes. I have been talking with him about it. He's not really connected with the CIL right now. I gave him some leads to check into, but I thought maybe we should talk about, like, if he's interested in coming, if what we have also at April, whatever we have left over after we look at I encouraged him to reach out to Millyanne at the Arizona Silk, because he's living in Tucson now. I think Tucson.
I never know where he is. I think I assumed he was in Pennsylvania for some reason, or maybe he was there at some point.
He was there. Yeah, he
Okay.
was there, not any longer.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go take a quick break. I'll see y'all in a couple minutes.
Wonderful. And if anybody's not taking a break, you're welcome. If you have any questions or stories you want to share.
I just want to say I really appreciate this. I mentioned that I'm the third generation in my family to have a disability, and I've grown up listening to stories all the way back from my grandparent, who was born right before World War II and kind of lived through the eugenics movement of that time. So this is all great information. Thank you for sharing it.
Oh, it's definitely our pleasure. Is Andy, are you here still, or are you off somewhere? Well, if you're off, you're not going to answer me.
I'm here.
Okay. So talk to me about Anthony, or about Tesler. I don't know him.
Oh, okay. So he is the photographer who does most of the photos when you think of the 504 protest in San Francisco.
Oh.
He's the guy who did a lot of those photos.
Okay, so he was before Tom then. All right, gotcha.
Yeah, he's still around. I was doing a presentation a while back, and I decided, like, you know what? I'm just gonna send him an email, and probably won't hear back from him, or if I will, it'll just be an automated response of, yeah, you can use my thing. And just randomly I get this phone call, and I'm like, let me answer that. And sure enough, it's Anthony Tesler calling me, and we chatted for a while. Yeah, he's a really fascinating guy.
Wow. Well, and
Um,
I just Googled him here, and I haven't read any articles. I'm just looking at some of the little suggestion things, and it says that his photos have been, that they're on the Ed Roberts campus, where I've been there in Berkeley, and then numerous independent living centers across the United States. So,
Yeah.
thank you for mentioning him, because I don't think I've ever taken the time to look to see who did those photos. So now I'm going to learn more about him.
I am too. Thank you, Annie. And the April conference being in California this year, wonder if maybe you could share his email address or something with me. I'd love to invite him out and talk about the 504 photo, since it's, we're commemorating.
Yeah, I can see what I can do. I wouldn't say I have a particularly close connection to him, but yeah, I can,
And he
I can
uses a
give you what I
wheelchair.
have. Yeah.
He's a wheelchair user.
His self-portrait from when he's young, which, if I remember the name of the photo is right, it's Poor Little Tony, is like, it is the photographic work that, when I think of Disability Pride as like a photograph of Disability Pride, it's that one, because of the
Wow.
sheer comedy of how he named that photo and how he shows that he is powerful. He looks like he could kick pretty much anyone I know's bum in that photo. And just the title being that juxtaposition is just hilarious, and
Wow.
such a good work of.
Well, now I learned something new. So I really thank you so much for mentioning him.
Yeah.
No, thank you. I'm Googling him too, and I'm going to start talking about him. Wonderful.
Well, and there's
you know-
actually, I've got a link here. Let me see if I can post this. Let me find that. Okay, it's about disability.com. Let me put it in the chat.
That's his website.
I think so. That's what it looks like.
Yeah. Are any of you familiar with Ranger Vicky White by any chance?
Is this one of the people you worked with at the recreational thing?
So I didn't work with her, but she
Ah.
worked there long before me. And she was one of the kind of leaders of the Marin Center for Independent Living, but also was huge in terms of helping the Park Service start its journey towards becoming accessible. Yeah, and I have a photo of her on my desk.
Oh.
Yeah.
I am so excited. Lavender also mentioned that they're grateful to be here and learning so much.
Oh, whoops.
And that they're actually hopefully going to be starting at Kent State in January for grad school.
Okay.
Congratulations. That's awesome. All right.
All right. So now I sent this link to only Abby, and I don't know why that was.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh,
Here, I'll
but
send
you
it
posted
along.
it. Never mind. You posted it to everyone, so that's good. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Mary.
I did, and I am going to reach out to Mr. Tessler. I don't know if he travels, but it would be cool. What else? Anybody else have some pieces of culture and history that they'd like to share? I love this that we're all adding to the narrative. Yeah, Ash.
I could share. So when we were talking about Crip Camp, I got really excited because I hosted a couple weeks ago Crip Camp viewing session for youth programs.
Oh, cool.
And it was in the Ed Roberts campus. And then we were like doing outreach and shared it with like folks in the Oakland Berkeley Disabled email listserv. And Denise Jacobson replied, and she's like, "Oh, I'm doing an interview at the Ed Roberts campus that same day. Do you want me to swing by and answer
you
any
said,
questions?"
yes.
And we're like, absolutely. And it was so crazy because But it was really incredible because it was like cosmic timing where Denise Jacobson was like watching her and her late husband's story on the film.
Right,
Like,
right. Was
right
that so?
while
This was
she was
after.
there.
This was after Neil passed away.
Yeah, so this was a couple weeks ago.
Oh wow.
So
So
yeah,
that was
she
still
was like
new for her.
crying about
Oh.
that. But then also so excited to be with youth and share about her experience being on the film and doing disability advocacy along with Judy Human. And so yeah, it was really cool to be in that space
Oh,
and hear
absolutely.
her stories. Yeah.
That's great. That's wonderful. I think it was probably good for her too. Just, you know, it's probably been really hard since Neil passed away. So I'm sure
Yeah,
she
I think
appreciated being there with you
I think
guys.
it was like she was like smiling, seeing the memories from Cook Camp.
Yeah. Oh, it's just making my eyes tear up.
I can't stop smiling. I'm just like getting to be a part of this. Thanks for asking me to come, Abby. I mean, really,
Of course.
Marsha's the bread and butter of the presentation, but I get to be here among these amazing leaders and kind of I'm tearing up a little bit. It's like seeing our dream kind of come true. You guys are all doing such amazing work in your communities.
I got the chance to read everybody's applications and to interview some folks, and so I know that this group comes from such a varied background that it's really a pleasure to get to finally meet all of you and to share this part of history with you. This was not, we didn't do a lesson on disability history last year, and it was something I regretted not doing because I think it gets people really fired up about doing new things. And it also is like this shared past that we all have as disabled people that people don't always know about. And so I thank you both for doing this. That being said, it has been 10 minutes. So
I think that is a great segue talking about our shared history and this culture that we're all a part of to share screen.
I definitely did it on purpose, and it wasn't just me rambling at all.
Well, for those of you who may not recognize the cartoon that's on the front, the little guy leading the little parade there is Pelswick. And Pelswick was a short-lived cartoon series, and it was a wonderful, wonderful cartoon series. Pelswick was just a scrappy kid who lived a typical life and even helped get his grandma out of a nursing home. So, and he was the creation of a humorous cartoonist called John Callahan, who's written a number of books and has a lot of cartoon books as well as some things that are prose. John also was a wheelchair user, and the title of one of his books is He Won't Get Far on Foot, and that's one of his cartoon books. And I have most all of those too. So, but anyway, so that's the part. Now, Mary, were you going to start with this, or you tell me?
You take it away and I'll add in. How about next slide?
Well, this particular quote is something that both Mary and I absolutely love. And it says, disability is not a brave struggle or courage in the face of adversity. Disability is an art. It's an ingenious way to live. And the person who wrote that quote, Neil Marcus, and he wrote that in 1993, was an amazing playwright and actor. Neil had a kind of dystonia, again, was a wheelchair user. I saw him in 1992 in San Francisco, California at a TASH conference. It was a performance of a play he did called Storm Reading. And there was Neil, and then there was another man and a woman. So there was ASL in it, and then they would sometimes speak his words, because with his dystonia, sometimes his speech was very hard to understand. There were some pieces that he could say, but he was hysterical. He had the greatest sense of humor and was just a brilliant man. And it's somebody also who, if you ever get a chance to see a recording of Storm reading, and it is on, I'm not sure if it's on DVDs. I know it's still on VHS.
Hey, Marcia, our
yeah.
Jedi mind melding happened. I actually put a YouTube video with Storm reading in it before you started talking, because
Are
that's
you
my favorite. I did, because that's my favorite dance of his too. And I remember watching it on VHS at your house in my early 20s.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and I just feel so fortunate having gotten to see it in person. Next slide, please. So anyway, you know, what makes disability culture different from other cultures? And it says, hint, pass it on. And the reason for that is that when most of us grow up in a family, the culture, if we're Irish, or if we're Indigenous, or you know, if we're African American, the cultures get passed on in our family. Since there's only one person here that had talked about being the third generation of a family with disabilities, where that culture could have gotten passed down. For most of us, we have to learn our culture from other people with disabilities. So that's the pass it on piece. Next slide, please. And if you think about what are the elements of a culture, so most cultures there's history, and we've been talking some about that. There's language. ASL is you know, one of the things for disability culture. Values, art, music, laws, rules and customs, science and technology, literature and theater. So all of these things exist that are produced by people with disabilities as well. When Mary was talking earlier about Ed Roberts and the night ops, where they would take sledgehammers and break up the curbs so that people would have to do curb cuts. Curb cuts are something that are one of the things that the disability community has brought to everybody. And when you think about a curb cut, it's not just used by people who use wheelchairs or crutches or walkers. I mean, anybody who is pushing a stroller, or somebody who's like me, old as dirt, who, you know, doesn't do steps so well anymore, or people who are moving something on wheels, or even pulling a suitcase on wheels. Curb cuts and ramps are things that serve all of us. So it's an all of us kind of thing. Some of you may have in the past used Dragon Dictate, which is, you know, a number of years old. I was somebody that actually couldn't use it, because when I tried to pattern it, what came back was nothing like what I said, and everybody in my office laughed at me. So, but Dragon Dictate, which started for people with disabilities, ultimately got scooped up by people in the professions. There's a law version, there's a medical version, you know, executives all use it. And now on all of our phones, you know, most of them anyway, you have a little microphone that you can press and talk your messages, and it types them up for you. So that was one of the other things that the disability community brought to everybody. There were other things that have gone to the moon that actually started with the disability community, and then are there for everybody. For, you know, in literature and theater, there are just so many things. There are both, you know, actors that have disabilities, but there are, you know, many books that are written by first-person accounts that are written by people with disabilities. You know, there's a lot of art and music that's produced by people with disabilities. And I have, you know, a number of things in my own personal library that I've collected. I don't know if any of you have ever seen South Park and seen Timmy. I even have a Timmy doll. And if you press his hand, you know, he sits in a wheelchair, and if you press his hand, he goes, Timmy, Timmy, you know, and other things. But anyway, so, you know, we're everywhere. Next slide, please. Okay, Honora loves South Park. Well, you know, what's not to love? One of the other people that was just amazing in helping to share disability culture is Cheryl Marie Wade. And she said that disability culture is about naming and claiming our heroes. In the disability community, we have a really, a very varied and rich culture. And it's one of the things that gives me great pride. They're just amazing people in the world of disabilities. And okay, what's this one? Is this, Mary, did you just put up something from Cheryl Marie Wade?
I did. I found one of her doing here.
Oh, yeah, that's one of, yeah, no, that's great. So there's I don't know if that's the 15 minute or so video of hers that has a bunch of different little performances, which are poems, which are just fabulous. So she's somebody else that, and she also has done whole big units actually on disability culture that are also, I think, still available. So I'll see if I can find that and send that to you too. Next slide, please. Okay, so, you know, we've touched on a little bit of history and we've touched on some culture and with the kinds of things that can help us feel pride in who we are. And then that can lead us to help demand change and demand the rights that we deserve. Next slide, please. And so where does power come from? Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, you know, we don't have a lot of power in terms of money. We don't have a lot of power in terms of being in places of power or in positions of power, but you can gain power through pride. And pride is obviously feeling good about yourself. Pride is knowing that you deserve access to the same things that others want and have. And pride is what allows us to demand the rights that we're entitled to. In the photos over here, the one photo of the balloon is, this balloon it's called Serena's Song. And here in Missoula, Travis Hoffman at our Independent Living Center at one year at the beginning of the university's move-in dates, brought Serena's Song to Missoula, and it was an accessible balloon where people who use wheelchairs could ride in it. And I see that Mary just posted another link that's, yes, and Erica, actually, it's sort of, these two are connected. Erica talked about it. It reminds me of You Get Proud by Practicing, which is one of the poems that Laura Hershey wrote. And Laura was a very close friend of mine, and I miss her terribly. But she wrote incredible poems about disability. One of my favorites is obviously You Get Proud by Practicing. Another one was called In the Way, which was about an adapt action where people who maybe couldn't move any part of their body except maybe their head or one finger to move a wheelchair could block a doorway and nobody could get through. And so it was like the first time I saw an adapt, my first action, where many people felt like they had a sense of physical power because they could block something that nobody else could get through, and they weren't being shoved aside. Next slide, please. This is a picture of my husband, Bob, who passed away 4 years ago. And it was taken in the Harpaw Park in Singapore, which is the people who make, oh, shoot, I'm going to forget it again. I just was talking about it today with somebody. It comes in the little jars, and it's red and it's hot. And you can put it on your skin.
Yeah. You and I were talking about it. It's that
Tiger Balm. It's Tiger Balm. That's it. So anyway, pride can equal power, and power is never given. I mean, people, if you think about people in Washington, D.C. right now, they're just trying to get power for themselves. There's not a lot of stuff going on that's good for the rest of us, as far as I can tell. And so nobody's going to give you power. You have to take it. You have to demand it. You have to demand a place at the table, and take power over the things that concern your life. Next slide, please. So pride equals power. And when you put people and power together, that can equal change. And that's, the Free Our People logo is ADAPT's logo, breaking the chains of oppression and freeing people from institutional settings and inaccessibility. Next slide, please. So we need to learn to be experts in our own lives. It's important to advocate for certain legislation, to push for regulatory change, to participate in local community commissions and give testimony, whether you send it to your state legislature or your city council or the federal government, or whether you actually go and testify in person. All of those things are important. To participate in committees and commissions and councils, anything you can, because your participation there is going to help increase visibility for disability, and you're going to have information that those other people don't have there and that they desperately need in order to make policies and laws that are inclusive of everyone. So there's also a song that is called Learning My ABCs that is kind of a comedy take, but it's all too true about, whether it's PAs, personal assistants, or CILs, SSI, SSDI, but there are a whole lot of other acronyms that get thrown around in the disability arena by all of the people who provide services. And you also need to know that the disability community is frankly a cash cow for a lot of other people. We support the lives and the economy of a lot of other people. If you require personal assistance in order to live in your own place, there's money that's going to pay those people. There's money that's paying the provider. There's money that's paying the personal assistant or the caretaker, whatever name you call people. And there's a whole lot of money that goes into disability services and into the medical field that comes literally off of our backs. And so it's really important for us to demand our place at the table and to demand things that are inclusive of us and accessible to us. Next slide, please.
Marcia, who was it? Was it, I want to say it's Senator Harkin, but that can't be right. Who said if you're not at the table, you're on the menu?
I remember you used to put that in presentations and stuff. It wouldn't surprise me if it was Tom Harkin.
I think it was. Yeah.
It may have been. Senator Tom Harkin had a brother who was deaf. And so he was very much an advocate for anything that had to do with disability and was very much a wonderful partner for all of us. So ultimately, when you look at where do we go? What do we do? It's like, don't mourn, don't complain about what we don't have, because there's a lot we don't have. And there's a lot we need to have and we deserve to have. Organize, building networks and collaborating. And we talked about some of that. Mary talked about some of that early on with collaborating with other organizations that are looking at social justice. And so, think about what networks or collaborations that you might be part of and how you can add to our combined history and culture. And some of you are doing that every day with the work that you do or the things that you participate in. Next slide, please. And so this is just the beginning. The gentleman in this slide is originally from Montana, and his mom lived on a little town in Dillon called Lover's Lane. But he moved from here in Montana down to Colorado because of the personal assistance available at the time. And that's the ADAPT flag that he's flying behind him. And he and his mom, who at the time was in her 60s or 70s, his mom got arrested with him once at an ADAPT protest. It was pretty cool. So, and I think, there you go. Mary, you've got all these.
They're hot linked.
Okay, they're all hot links. Okay.
Yep. And then Abby, I'm sorry, I'm making a lot of work for you, but I dropped in the chat links to Laura Hershey's In the Way, and You Get Proud by Practicing.
There were some other ones that you did that are really great. You did some good links.
I did Here by Cheryl Marie Wade.
Yeah.
I
Did you do
recommend
Not Dead Yet?
Not Dead Yet? No.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you did a link for Not Dead Yet or not. Okay.
I'll throw that in there. I'll throw Not Dead Yet in there. And I just have to say, Cheryl Marie Wade, I put the video because I really like.
It's great.
He just has such good.
Yeah.
Just draws you in. But so I think we tried to zoom through so we could just have a discussion too. I can't believe we made it, Marcia.
I can't believe we made it either. I'm amazed.
Does anybody have questions or want to share what kinds of collaborations or kind of community organizing work that you're a part of?
Yeah, questions, comments, experiences, anything you want.
So this is Emily. West Virginia was actually the first state to pass legislation to teach disability history in the school system. They passed that in 2006, I want to say.
That's fantastic.
And then we're also doing our first, I'm really excited about this, but we're doing our first car show, but we're also doing first responders training on how to extract somebody who is in a modified car hopefully without destroying their car completely.
Oh, that's something that's really needed. That's terrific. It actually, Emily, when you said that they passed the stuff about history in the schools, did you get to take any of that, or do you know anybody that has? Do you have any comments about any of it?
So I was lucky, like my teachers were very on top of teaching it. And plus I joined my independent living council straight out of high school. And so between that and what I learned in the school system, I got a good foundation. And my executive director before she retired is awesome. You might know her, Ann McDaniel.
Well, I don't know her personally, but I certainly know who she is.
So
so how did you feel good about what they were teaching you in school? Looking back at it now, do you feel like it was that they did a good, responsible job with it?
So no. Because they taught it from a people with disabilities, can't do anything type of thing.
Oy.
Yeah, Abby, I felt the same way. But we, between what I learned and with Ann, because I met Ann when I was still in high school, and it took her a couple years to convince me to apply for the council. But she didn't give up.
Good thing.
But I've been working with my alma mater and changing how they taught it. And then we also have a essay contest that we do for specifically juniors and seniors, where they have to research the movement and write an essay on a certain topic. And then we get essays from all over the state, and then we judge it and we decide winners. And so then they get a scholarship for college.
Oh, that's cool. Well, and hopefully through this Lead On program, you'll have other resources that you can share with folks, especially some of the audiovisual things, I think, that are really capture people's attention. But that's great that you're doing that kind of work. Thank you for that.
Thank you for teaching me some things I didn't know.
Well, hey, at the halftime, I learned some things I didn't know, so I was grateful for that. Does anybody else have any comments or questions or anything they'd like to share, any experiences?
I wanted
Don't
to make
everybody
sure
talk at once. No.
I wanted to make sure this got said out loud. Rachel asked earlier in the chat if we would be sharing the recording, which yes, we will. Thank you, Mary, for hitting play when I absolutely forgot. Hopefully maybe Erica and Riley, you can help me remember, because it is an area in which I need to grow. So
on my end, it says that you're recording.
We are. So I got here very early because I have anxiety, and thus paused the recording because I didn't want a half an hour of me just sitting here going, oh, I hope everybody comes. So I paused the recording and would not have remembered to press play had Mary not done so. All that being said, we will be sending out the recording, and I will also send out a resource list along with the updated PowerPoint. So because there were a couple slides that I just didn't get around to sending to y'all today. The version you have is mostly the same, but there's little things here and there that are not the same. So all of it will be sent out to you. So if you need refreshers for your journaling, or if you have, you missed something, it'll all be there. I saw a hand up. Go ahead.
This is Naomi. Sorry for the background noise, but I was wondering, you sit on the SSI Advisory Council, is that right? I was wondering what your experience has been since SSI came about, SSDI, and your thoughts and opinions. I'm curious to learn more.
Well, it was the Social Security Advisory Board, and I was on it from 2006 to 2012. The Social Security Act itself passed in 1935. SSI came around in the early 1970s, along with Medicaid. And, you know, two things that probably continue to just really make me angry and annoy me are both the marriage penalty that's contained in both SSI and Social Security disability, as well as the fact that you're not allowed to save any money for the most part. I mean, very little. It hasn't changed in like 30 years what you can have in the bank. And there is, I think there's legislation right now, an SSI Improvement Act maybe, that would hopefully change that, but I'm not sure where that sits at this minute. Do you have some specific questions about it that you want to find out more about?
I guess I've been navigating that system for as long as I can remember, probably since I was 18. And I've been like trying to think of a way I agree with your 2 points. And then also like, what in your eyes in the disability community, what are some ways if we could like wave a magic wand and make legislation pass of like, what can we do to improve it for like the community and also kind of universally design, like universal design, you know, all that.
Well, one of the things that I always talked about when I used to do a lot of training on SSI and SSDI. And one of the things that I started out with in the beginning is that when you look at Social Security itself, starting in 1935, and then looking at SSI and Social Security disability coming along after, every time there's been a change in Congress, they've tinkered with it a little here, a little there, and often they really have no clue what they're tinkering with because they don't understand the policy. Both of those programs are incredibly complex and complicated, and they aren't easy. So when you take it as a whole, it's sort of like my grandmother's, you know, they used to call there was a kind of quilt they used to call a crazy quilt. I don't like to call it that anymore because I think crazy is a pejorative term, but they were quilts that were made up of different squares that were all different colors. They all had different threads in them and different kinds of embroidery. And, you know, it wasn't like a big pattern. It was just a bunch of different squares all put together. And they were really cool quilts, but they didn't all go together. And right now in the policy, things don't all go together. Some of the things in the policy are actually opposite of other things in the policy. And you have to learn, you know, and learning that people who get trained, the disability navigators who get trained in this stuff. I mean, the book is absolutely huge. And I used to have the paper copies of the policy in my office before they put it on CDs or digitized it, you know, online. And it literally went from one wall to the other in my office. There's that much policy. And that was just SSI and SSDI, not all of Social Security. So part of the problem is not being able to know exactly what the rules are. And even people who work for Social Security don't always know the rules. I found that because all I dealt with was the disability part when I was doing advocacy in this for 30 years. I knew that policy better than the people who worked at the Social Security office because that's all I dealt with, and they didn't deal with that as often. And so often I would be teaching them their own policy, which just seems, pardon my French, but ass backwards to me. I mean, it's, you know, but people need to know what their rights are about it. You need to know you can go in and ask for copies of the policy, and you can get 50 pages at a time for free. The policy is also online, so there are ways to search for stuff, you know, to know exactly what the policy says. But it isn't necessarily easy, and it isn't necessarily easy to understand, and you often have to cross-reference things. And so, you know, I wish there was a way to, you know, I don't know about starting over, but somehow waving that magic wand that you mentioned and making it sort of universal design and a lot simpler and more easily understood.
Wow, thank you so much.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say thank you so much. You probably said, gave me so much information in that little spiel that I've been trying to track down for years. So thank you so much. Thank you. Just
And
thank you.
if you need a link to a particular part of policy, if you send me an email, and you're going to be getting our email addresses at the end, Abby's going to send them out. I can probably, get you a link to the policy because I'm used to using it online. So.
Wow, that's amazing. You'll be hearing from me. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Any other questions? And I'm gonna also have Abby send out a link to the I was trying to remember when you were talking. I think it's Social Security now, or there's a reform bill that's on the table. And
yeah, I think it's like SSI Improvement Act or something. I can't remember for sure, Mary.
So I'm gonna pull that out and and have it sent too. We have just a few minutes left. Would anybody else like to ask questions or share experiences of what you're working on? While people are thinking, I want to say one of my favorite parts about this program is that we also have a group of young leaders that we can draw from. So for example, I got a call last week from the Office of Independent Living Programming asking me if I had a young person who would sit on a White House panel. So we were able to pull from last year's group, and Abby sent them a few names, and we get asked all the time for young leaders to be a part of what's happening. And now we get to know all of you in your specialty areas, and hopefully can connect you all with more opportunities to continue furthering your leadership and what you want to accomplish.
Abby, did you post that about, was it you that posted about Stephanie coming? Is it next week?
Yes, Stephanie will be here next week.
All right, so Stephanie Wood, I want everybody to know Stephanie Woodward is an absolutely awesome young woman and has done some amazing things. And I first got to know her through ADAPT. And please tell her Marcia says hi.
I will. We have a number of folks here who are, we have a really great relationship with Stephanie's organization, Disability Empower Her Network, which is, we've had some back and forth connection between the two organizations that I think is really great. Cecile, sorry. That is a very good question. You should have invitations in that I sent to each week's meeting, but it is the same link every week. It's a recurring meeting. So if you only have the one link from today, it'll work for the rest of the week as well. But each class, I sent out invitations to everybody, and they're labeled with what we're doing each week, so you can kind of start to prep yourself.
Okay, Abby, are you at the Rural Institute?
I am not.
Oh, you're not. Okay. I don't know why I thought you were.
Abby's with us, Marcia.
Well, I knew that, but I didn't know. But for some reason, I didn't know she was over there too. The reason I asked is, I'm just wondering whether you folks, at any point, if you have any connections or any resources for places that could digitize some of the resources that I have, especially like some of the CDs and the audio tapes and things like that, so that they can be available for people.
There are ways. I mean, personally, I'm sitting here next to my parents' Hi8 camcorder, which I have been needing to take tapes off of for ages because I personally have one of those converters, or rather I should say my partner has one. But they exist out there. They're actually pretty cheap nowadays to get those things moved from one place to another, because technology has both not kept up with itself and has tried to catch up with itself all at once. So
I think I saw, Marcia, did you have several boxes of, was it mouth?
I have 2 boxes that contain almost complete sets of both the disability rag and the mouth. And I'm supposed to be sending them to Fred Pelka, who was going to try to get them somewhere to be archived.
So for those of you who don't know, those are both, they're like mini magazines, you know, like back in the day when we read paper stuff.
Yeah, in the 90s and 2000s. Yeah.
Well, I
And
just
they were
wanted to say,
amazing.
oh yeah, they have some great info. That was it Lucy Goodwin?
Lucy
No.
Gwynn did the mouth, and Mary Johnson did the disability rag.
Yeah.
And the mouth actually used to be called This Brain Has a Mouth, but then it just got shortened to the mouth to mouth, and disability rag actually got shortened to just rag, the rag, but they were both awesome publications.
Well, this is Mary. I just wanted to say thank you so much for you all letting us come in and talk today. And thank you, Marcia, for doing this with me. I at one point forgot I was presenting with you and just sat back and listened because I just love Marcia telling these stories. It's like it's what started my love of the disability movement. And I hope that I challenge you all to go out and find a couple of people to share it with and keep the culture and the community growing and passing along.
And for those of you who are from, minority or marginalized communities, please, look to see how you can either, look through history of people in your community who have contributed and or voices or stories or anything, and get that stuff shared, because it all needs to be part of the whole. It's there and we all need to know it, and we don't know it yet.
Yes. And I also just wanted to throw out there, I know you all will get to join us in California. One of the days I get the date on Friday during the conference, another one of our old friends, Andy Imparato, is going to be doing a workshop on coalition building. And I recommend you all stopping in if that's something you're interested in. Marcia and I were talking the other day about the heart of the disability community. And the movement really starts with building each other up, building coalitions, and building our community. And so I'm excited that he's going to do that, and hopefully, you all can check it out. I think we took it to the minute, Marcia.
Yeah.
Did it?
So yes, thank you both. Thank you, Mary and Marcia, for doing this. I am so grateful to have both of your knowledge shared with all of these young people, and with myself. I learned a lot. So everyone, we are done for the whatever time it is in your time zone. So I remember journals are due to myself or Erica or Riley by 24 hours before our next group. So on the 30th, at whatever time it is group starts for you, is when your journals are due. And if you have questions about that, please feel free to email one of us. And otherwise we'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, baby Jack.
Bye. Jack slept through all of it.
Oh, that's so great. All right, bye everyone.
Bye, guys.